two, one. Hello, everyone. Welcome to a very, very, in my mind, timely Unpacked conversation, the case for investing in Black art. We had a lot of interest in this conversation, particularly from a community like the Gravy community, which is, over-indexing on underrepresented folks. We have Louis Long here. Louis Long is a good friend of mine. He's been a day one Gravy community member and frequent contributor. If you look at our archive, he co-authored a previous newsletter on Black art. He kind of broke down, for the layman, how do you just, kind of get up to speed on the market? Some of the things that you may not even think about, you need to know, like, talk to your partner, make sure they're aligned before you start spending money on art, et cetera, et cetera. He's fresh, still in Miami from Art Basel Miami, and he corrected me earlier. Miami Art Week. Basel's just one thing going on that week. But, the reason that we rescheduled this talk is because there was a lot that happened between November and December, and we want to make sure we included that in this conversation. And Louis, to give a little bit of a background, he and I are both Howard alum. He and I are also HBS alum. He is co-president of the HBS African American Alumni Association. He is a gallerist, owner of Long Gallery Harlem. He's an ex-banker, White House fellow. I mean, this guy, he's done it all. And the best part about Louis is you wouldn't even know he's the humblest guy in the whole world. And he's someone who I look to all the time as a role model from the perspective of handling business, but also just being a super cool, relatable guy. So with that being said, Louis, welcome. Really appreciate you taking the time to kind of walk us through this topic here, which is what's happening. Why should we be looking at the African-American Black art, market? What is happening? What's exciting? What are the trends? What are we seeing here? You've been in this space for a very long time. Maybe you start with a quick intro, to kind of support the lead in. Tell us a little bit about, what's happening with you right now and what you're excited about. And then we kind of hop into the conversation.
Sure. First of all, thank you, Brandon. I really appreciate what you're doing. I think, we as a community don't often talk enough about wealth. We run away from that topic, and to give real practical, tangible guides as to different asset classes and different approaches and different strategies to help build wealth for our families and for our communities. I just think it's a conversation that we need more of. And that's why I'm so predisposed to always picking up the call when you call. So
appreciate it. And the feeling's mutual, man. Anything I can do, absolutely. We're here. You definitely embody Gravy. So you're in Miami right now. Before we kind of hop into the stats and the numbers, give us some of the qualitative. What are you feeling right now, Miami? What was Art Basel like? Explain kind of what the significance is for Miami Art Week, Art Basel. Why is that important for the art world in general, but also specifically for Black artists? And what have you seen just this week?
Yeah, let me first just explain kind of the dynamics of it, because I think most people hear this generic term, Art Basel. I'm going to Art Basel. And for many people, their first introduction of it is almost like going to NBA All-Star Weekend, right? And because it has the celebrity hype and it has the parties that people see and social media take over. But it's really a serious moment for business transactions. And so for people that are in the art ecosystem, anyone in the art ecosystem, there's an opportunity to participate. A lot of people make, or drive their income based off of, Art Basel. And so Art Basel is one of the many art fairs that occur during what is called Miami Art Week. Art Basel was obviously the impetus for that. It was started in Switzerland, in Basel, Switzerland. And when it came to Miami in 2002, Miami was, it had the Miami Vice kind of like hangover. It had the big nightclub kind
fast
of
cars, some of the powder, if you will. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so with the explosion that has occurred over 20 years, and this year marked 20 years of Art Basel, that we really now see that it's a really part of culture. It's really helped the city from an economic development standpoint. And what was just one art fair, which was kind of like a premium brand, Art Basel, it's now has many other fairs. And so, you will come to Miami during the Monday after Thanksgiving. And I say Monday, that's something that we talked about before, is that this week really begins the Monday after Thanksgiving. And so all of the dealers and artists are really, kind of planning to be in Miami over Thanksgiving. And when it hits, I mean, there's an action-packed schedule that literally begins on Monday, from dinners to private showings. This year, the pre-show for Art Basel was on Tuesday, and the pre-show for the Untitled Art Fair was on Monday. And so Untitled was the first art fair that opened this week. It exhibits in a tent on the beach, a large constructed tent next to another art fair called Scope, SCOPE. And then around the city of Miami, you also have Art Miami. You have a smaller fair that I always will mention because it's one that was founded and managed by a Black woman, and it's called Prism, PRIZM. Follow it. Get their newsletters. Is a great indicator of early artists in terms of breaking into the scene. They work with a few black galleries, but they also work directly with some artists. And there's some standouts that have come through Prism. But Art Basel and Design Miami, which is across the street, Art Basel is in the Miami Beach Convention Center. And the scale and the scope is mind-blowing. This year, they have a curated section that has special projects. And there's an escalator that goes up to the collector's lounge, which is something anybody who comes here wants to go to. But as you scale that escalator, you get to see just how many galleries that are here. And the one thing I will say overall in 2022, and I started coming to Art Basel perhaps in 2011, 2012, and you could almost count on one hand the booths that you could go to where you're going to see art by artists of color. Now you can't count. I mean, I actually tried to give someone a quick guide, and before you knew it, the entire map was kind of like marked up. And so just to give you a sense of the scale, it's huge. There's a lot to see. You have to pace yourself. But I would definitely say as a starting point, because it's curated, I think there are some issues with that, and that's another conversation for another day. But as a starting point, it's a good place to start. And so, yeah.
So long story short here, for the purists, you're coming in Monday. The tourists come Thursday, Friday-ish. So if you really want kind of that insider glimpse into what's happening in the art world, you want to come earlier in the week. The
collectors are gone by Thursday and Friday, and the best work is gone by Thursday, Friday.
Got it. Because transactions are happening. This is not just about showing.
Transactions are happening beforehand. So if there's a gallery that you follow or an artist that you like, you should start tracking them, early in the year. And by November, they're going to start sending out previews of works to their list of collectors.
Now, are these works priced, or is there some type of negotiation?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is it bidding that happens real time?
Absolutely. It's not bidding because they're private sales. And so if you're fortunate enough to get on the list, which that's not very hard to do, whatever gallery is exhibiting, then you contact them, you tell them you want to see you want the advance list of what's going to be sold, and then you can start negotiations at that point. In many cases, they won't close a deal because they want to collect interest. And in their collecting interest, they will start to prioritize, is this a collector? Is he a part of a museum board? What kind of collection does he have? They might even ask you, where are you? How much are you spending on art? Would you give a piece to a museum if we, gave you one of the 5 pieces that we have by XYZ artists?
It's important for them to get museums for exposure. They
For
want.
exposure and for value, driving value for the
Got it.
artist and
Okay.
the legacy.
So, all right. So a lot, it's so much to unpack. So let's structure it like this. Maybe you can give us a little bit on what got you interested into art, and keep that part brief, because I think just the way you speak about it energetically, we know that you're all about this. And then you touched on something I think is a great lead into the conversation we're having today, which is, as you went to Basel, you used to be able to say it was far in between where you would find works from people of color. Now it's prominent. There's a
Mhm.
reason for that. And then when that happens, there's a benefit in terms of investment, right? You know, having a more liquid market, having appreciation for this space. So that's a great segue into some of the trends that we actually want you to cover. So let's start off with, what got you really, because you've been in business, you've been in finance, you've been, in politics to a degree as a White House fellow. Where did the love and the passion for art kick in for you?
It's really the intersection of it being a serious business that many people don't think of as a business. They think of it as simply an aesthetic pursuit, a pastime. Two, it in many ways is reflective of social conditions. And so from a intellectual standpoint, from a historical standpoint, in many cases, the works by at least artists of color have some element of social justice concerns and or amplifying some historical reference or bringing a new narrative. And so I've worked in advertising before, in business and marketing. And one of the things I always try to do is, particularly as being a decision maker with advertising and talent, was to always ensure that the brands that I worked on had talent that was representative of our consumer base. And so representation in shorthand matters. And so seeing this space and seeing the opportunity for artists and for artists of color to be promoted, to be celebrated. And at the time that I got into it, there really weren't as many options. Now there are more options, but representation matters. And I saw that as an opportunity for representation, intellectual pursuits, and money.
Got it. All right. So with that being said, let's pull up the deck. Let's kind of get.
Let's jump into it. So what I wanted to do was, and just to explain contextually, we thought about doing this talk a while ago, and after we kind of went back and forth on it, it was like, you know what, there's a lot happening, as Brandon said, and there are a lot of things that are happening in the larger macro economy, right? And so let's put into context, what is currently happening in the art market, as evidenced by the auction house sales that always occur in the second and third week of November, and also Art Basel, and report on that in a way. So what we'll talk about tonight is kind of what have we seen in terms of the most recent market activity that informs and contextualizes what this means in terms of what's happening in the broader market and this recession, so to speak. That's the intent.
And what I'll say is that I was talking to Lewis about this before we started. I actually watched one of Christie's live auctions, which they're live streaming now, one of these kind of premier evening sale events. It's a show. I would definitely recommend anyone go to Christie's website, Sotheby's website, sign up for to attend, the auction live streamed, and it is definitely entertaining. But also, and we talked about this, we don't know if there was one African-American person maybe in a room of probably 150 folks. So there's a lot of continued progress that needs to be made, even though we're seeing some strides here. So what do we have here, Lewis?
Yeah, so you can see the screen, fine.
It's beautiful. This piece right here.
Good deal. So, I had to start with and do a nod to Sam Gilliam. Sam Gilliam is my homeboy. He's from DC, and he passed away this summer. And so this is a tribute to him of sorts, because he was very well represented at Art Basel this year. This is a really, really good example of his work. This is a work on paper that I came across, actually not at Art Basel, but during my visit to the Rebelle collection, which any visit to Miami anytime should be coupled with a visit to the Rebelle collection, which is just west. And it's essentially a museum, but it's a private museum. There's also one that just opened in Washington just 2 or 3 months ago. And so just
the state of Washington?
No, Washington, D.C.
Oh, so the Rebel is where?
in Southwest Washington in a school.
Oh,
I can't
so
remember the
they're
name.
both in Washington. Okay,
No,
got
no,
it.
no. One, the original is in Miami,
Okay,
and then there was one that just opened in Washington.
got it.
And
This piece right here is something that you actually had in your gallery.
no, no, no. This is one that I saw at the Rebel collection this
Got it.
past week.
Got it.
Mhm.
Okay.
Oops. So in terms of current market conditions, everyone's aware of these things. We'll breeze through them pretty fast. NFT sales have dried up. That was the rage last year. You come to Art Basel, everyone's talking about NFTs. Guess what? That's done. There was no conversation, virtually no conversation on NFTs. However, there was a good conversation about digital art and Black digital art. There's been, abysmal performance of other asset classes. The S&P 500 is down, Bitcoin is down, and everyone's saying the housing market is declining. We've seen interest rate hikes by the Federal Reserve, really to really try to stem the tide of inflation. It seems like that is working to an extent. Oh, by the way, art is viewed as a great inflation hedge. It's also viewed as a tangible asset that's a good hedge for also other market changes. And then we have the ongoing impacts of the pandemic and also the war. And so I put this out front because this would suggest not such a great market environment to invest in art.
And let me just say something real quick, if you don't mind. For the folks that are attending, make sure you sign up for the Gravy newsletter. If you haven't, we kind of talked about this idea of, for the true believers in crypto and NFTs, obviously is a very tough time. There is a tax loophole available for crypto folks where NFTs as well, that it's not subject to the wash rules. So you can basically sell it at the loss, buy it right back at that low value, take the loss and still hold on to it, versus a stock sale where you basically have to hold on to it for a longer period of time. So a little bit of a silver lining, for folks that did go the NFT route, but appreciate that context. Back to you, Lewis.
Sure. And so if you look at just the historical perspective of the art market versus the various market indices, this clearly states upfront that, it's probably not a bad bet to place a bet in the art market. This shows you the historical run. There was a brief period in early 2018 where the art market kind of converged with the S&P 500, but it's since then taken off. Besides that, when you look inside the art market and you go deeper in terms of, okay, there are many different genres, there are many different artists. And so let's just look at African-American artists. If you look at the indexing of African-American artists since 2009, it's far and away kind of separated itself from the index of female artists, as well as other post-war and contemporary art. And I always love this quote by Glenn Lowry, which basically says that, if you're not looking at and not investing in African-American art, then you're just missing an important market.
And let me just real quick say, this is the second conversation Lewis has been a part of around art. I would encourage folks to go to the Gravy YouTube channel. He had a conversation along with Melody Edmonds, who was a senior art curator for Artsy. And we kind of dove a lot deeper into just the kind of the depth of what's happening for Black artists and why it's really important to dive into this underserved market. We're looking at more of the kind of the financial and the returns aspects here. That one is more about the qualitative aspect. So I would encourage, you all to kind of check it out.
Yeah. And so the head of MoMA is essentially saying here that some of the most amazing work interesting work is coming from African-American artists. And oh, by the way, guess what? They have not been represented in institutions. So with just penetration of 1% to 2% of collections of institutional public collections, there's a long way to go, right? In terms of driving a representative percentage of institutional collections. So, and it's important to make that point, because what that then means is that if museums are needing to buy art by Black artists to fill out their collections, then there is heft, there is a driver of value that's inherent in the need to change the scheme of representation. Oh, this is also happening while there are more Black directors at public institutions, there are more Black curators at these institutions. And so what you've seen as being scant representation is only going to increase. And you'll see more of that as I get into the presentation.
Would you go so far as to say these institutions, these museums are getting pressure from stakeholders to diversify their curatorial staff? Is that a part of it too? Or is it more driven by folks who are just kind of realizing that some of the best works are just not being represented?
I think it's a combination. I think there's some pressure from funders. I think that the private collectors, we just mentioned the Rebel collection. I'll also mention for anyone in the Washington, D.C. area, or if you're traveling to Washington, D.C., or you have plans to go in this spring, it's about a 2-month wait to get a reservation. But put Glenstone on your list. Glenstone is perhaps the most significant, most interesting institution of art that's owned and operated by a private family, and it's in Potomac, Maryland. Then the number 2 is Crystal Bridges in Arkansas. And so when you have private families that are investing in artists of color in such a big way, and they have representation that matches the percent of the population more so than public institutions, without public institutions doing something, they're almost rendering themselves irrelevant. Okay. So in terms of like the market, just real fast, I wanted to take you through some of the market results for the first half of the year, and then talk about the recent auctions, and then talk about Miami Art Basel 2022. First and foremost, if you look at just the top line sales through the first half of the year, in spite of all the market conditions we talked about, they're still holding, right? That's turnover, and this is a worldwide number, so that's why you see the word turnover. Turnover is often used globally for sales.
Wait, hold on, Louis. You got to slow us down. Walk us through these, so we know exactly what's happening in these charts here.
So if you look at the first chart, upper left-hand corner, look at the first half of 2022, you can see that you haven't seen a significant decline in sales. I mean, it's actually rebounding from the pandemic, but you have not seen a significant reduction. It's actually climbing in the first half of 2022.
Got it. What's that big drop that happened? It looked like, I don't know.
The pandemic.
Okay, got it. Okay.
Yeah. And then I was just gonna, go, if you look at the number of lots sold in public auctions, again, there are more lots being sold and they're climbing. And in fact, we've seen more lots sold in the first half of 2022 than we've seen in the last 10 years. Right. And then when you look at unsold lots, so these are all public auction numbers. When you look at unsold lots, that would mean something went up for auction, it didn't sell. And so therefore it's kind of like, oh man, a black eye, we tried to sell it, no one bought it. Then what you can see in the first half of 2022 is that didn't spike. It's pretty consistent. And then lastly, you still see a highest sale record being made in the first half of 2022. And in fact, it eclipses everything, but it is only rivaled by the first half of 2015. And so at least through the first half of the year, most indicators are that the art market is still rebounding from 2020 and that it looks pretty solid from all the other indicators.
By the way, for the audience, if you have any questions, feel free to pop them in now. We are reserving kind of time towards the end, but if you have any questions that kind of pop in your mind, Louis is happy to take some of those along the way.
Absolutely. So now let's look at, so that's the first half, right? But we've gone through July, August, and the steady drumbeat that we're hitting a recession. So what does that mean for the art market? And what, if we could try to read the tea leaves, like what indicators do we have that things are bad or things are not so great or they're good? So the first thing that occurred that is perhaps the most important moment of art this year is the sale of Microsoft founder Paul Allen's collection. It will go down, at least to this point, as the most valuable private collection in history. In one night, they sold $1.5 billion of art. In one night, 5 works sold for more than $100 million. In one night.
That's insane.
This painting right here sold for $150 million.
You know what's crazy? I've seen the painting on the wall before. Like, that's like a famous painting in and of itself. So this is a painting from that same artist of a room showing that painting in the room.
Yeah.
Is that what this is?
Yeah, it is. But this painting is really significant for a few reasons. One, look at the style. It is one of the early, and this is it should be 1888. I'm sorry, not 1988, 1888. It was painted in 1888. And you can see early impressionistic style. It's the dots, right, that help create the image. And so he's using a range of color in the dots to create this image. And he also is using, he's chosen as his muse a woman. We believe it's the same woman in different modes, in classic modes, nudes. And this is a period in time where we're now seeing the emergence of what we call the modern era or modernist art. And this is one where we have gone away from these paintings that are almost hyper real and are really interpretations that would replace or be a way to communicate visually a scene, a historical scene. This is also at the time of the emergence of photography. And so some people say that with the emergence of photography, art could change because the role of art could evolve to not necessarily be about hyperrealism because it wasn't the only message or way of communicating a historical moment or historical picture. Okay. And so this painting, as well as paintings by Cézanne, Van Gogh, Gauguin, they all sold for over $100 million. This by George Seurat, he's a young guy. He died at 31. So he was an innovator. And there were only a few paintings that he made. And so there's something to the scarcity of his body of work in this area. And which I would say probably also contributes to the scarcity and the value of it. The other thing that is important to note about this painting, if you live in Philadelphia, this is called the petite version. The reason why it's called the petite version is that the original version is actually at the Barnes Foundation in Philadelphia. And it's in the main room over the painting of the card players. And so it is mounted high, and so you wouldn't get a chance to see it as close up as you might be able to see this. This one is only 15 by 19 inches. So that's the other thing. Price per inch.
That's sold for how much?
$150 million. Wow. And one person standing in front of it said it's the most beautiful painting they've ever seen. So obviously beauty is in the eye of the beholder. But I wanted to spend some time on this because this is an example of a work at the turn of a new movement, an artist that was early in his career, that was actually an innovator, that actually died young, a work that is also replicated, or this is the replica of it, and it's on view currently. And so the one thing about auctions, particularly this auction, people stood in line for hours because in many cases, these works only change hands over the course of a generation, if ever. And so if you didn't get a chance to see this when it was on display at Christie's, once it goes into private hands, you might not ever see it again. And so, monitoring auctions, seeing what they have is a chance to delve into a war chest of opportunity that you might not have access to for a generation or ever. Any questions on that?
No, this was a lesson. Appreciate it.
Sure. And so now let's jump into the auctions. And so there are three main auction houses. And I'm going to go through the evening sales for Christie's, Sotheby's, and Phillips with a representative sample in most cases, or the samples of Black art that they sold. And so just for folks that are new to this, there are many auctions that occur over the course of a year, but generally the flagship auctions occur in November and again in May, and they're in evenings. So they're seasonally and they're 2 times a year. And essentially, if you own a work and you want to sell it, then you reach out to specialists at the auction houses, and then this would be a vehicle for you to sell. I think it's only 20 to 30% of works that change hands to private hands are sold through auctions. So this is the only transparent visibility you have into what's happening into market, because many of the other transactions happen privately, or they never see the light of day. So in this case, on the left, you have a Howard Dina Pendel painting. It was painted in 1971. And it had a range. So when you go in to place your works on consignment for the works to be sold, there are many different arrangements, but the most important is the range of projected what the painting might yield. And so in this case, the projection was $500,000 to $700,000, and this actually sold for $1.1 million. And this is acrylic on canvas, and it was painted in 1971. The Ernie Barnes, and you're going to see a consistent thread in each one of these auctions from each one of the auction houses in Ernie Barnes. And oh, by the way, this is not rocket science. It's like, what is it? The term imitation is the best form of flattery. So earlier this year, Brandon can talk about his experience with looking at Ernie Barnes, and I think it's the Sugar Shack. It's the one that everyone grew up watching on Good Times, and it sold for, what was it, 22 million?
It was a lot. I can't remember. It was
yeah. And so lo and behold, Ernie Barnes sets a record, and then everyone goes into their closet and go into their house and say, you know what, I got an Ernie Barnes. I'm gonna go talk he
made the November evening sale.
Yeah. So hey, I'm gonna now put mine out there. And so this one had an estimate of $60,000 to $80,000.
They did it on purpose. They lowball on purpose, right?
And this one sold 10 times plus that, $945,000. This was painted in 1979. It was acrylic, and it was called One on None. And so anyone who thinks that art is just an aesthetic pursuit, when you're looking at numbers, and we 2 paintings here on the page for $2 million, that's not bad for a day's work.
So the Sugar Shack, I looked it up. It went for 15.2 million. This is
15.2.
The Good Times painting that I'm sure many folks in the audience remember. I think it was also used in, for the audience, Camp Low. This is it. What, Lucini? That song, that album, the album cover was also Ernie Barnes. So I was telling Lewis, a lot of us kind of identify his work with just things that we came across, growing up, depending on what age. Go ahead.
So lo and behold, this is the Phillips Contemporary Art Evening Sale. And these sales, by the way, happen kind of successive nights. So they never overlap. They don't compete. They have earned a spot in the calendar, and the world knows when these occur. And it's consistent year over year. So again, there's an Ernie Barnes. And this one, now they were a bit more bullish. Their estimates for Stand Before the Storm was $300,000 to $400,000, and it sold for $604,000.
That's a steal.
Yeah, and the size of this is a slight smaller than the earlier one, right? So the one that went for nearly $1 million was 60 by 80. This is 40 by 24, so there are many contributors to pricing. Size is definitely one of them. Material is another. Obviously, pedigree of the artist is a big one.
But 40 by 24 that's not small.
It's not small, but it's smaller than the one that I referenced earlier.
So it's not about threshold. It's like the bigger the better, is what you're saying.
I didn't say that, because clearly that's not the case. When you look at the first example of the Paul Allen. That's only 15 by 19.
But generally speaking, you're saying, if our artist has multiple works, the bigger the work, the more likely it's gonna go for
Yeah.
more.
Yeah. And essentially, even in the primary market, the bigger the work is probably gonna sell more than, that's the guide, right? In the primary market, the bigger the work is gonna sell more than a smaller work. And that's a rule of thumb. And that's even how I price works coming out of my gallery. You see Mickalene Thomas. And let me say something about Phillips. Phillips, as you look at the different auction houses they perhaps had the widest representation of Black artists. And I need to do some digging to understand more why. And so in the other examples I will give, I gave exhaustive, everything that they had for Black artists. In this case, I only gave a sampling, and I just wanted to make a note of that. And so Mickalene Thomas, love her work. She is a brilliant strategist, really committed to her practice in being able to really create works in multiple modes. I'm most impressed by her latest series that actually she had 3 tranches. I mean, it's rare to see that. She was in New York, Paris, and I believe Hong Kong at the same time. And Mickalene, just as a point of trivia, has access to did research with the Jet centerfold. And everyone knows the photo of the week. And so she has a body of work most recently that was referencing, and in many cases were somewhat collages of historical archives of the Jet beauty of the week.
Wow.
In this case, I Can't See Me Without You. It sold for the mid-range of what the projection was. It was projected to go from 350 to 550. It went for 441,000. And this painting was made in 2007. I use painting loosely because it includes rhinestones, acrylic, as well as enamel on board. And the reason why I made the comment around her most recent body of work, her most recent body of work was in 3 different locations. This was slightly less than what you might get for the new body of work. So I think those were going for maybe $600,000 or $700,000. So this is a bargain comparatively for Mickalene Thomas, for where her practice has been and where it's going. Another artist that I just love is below her work, and that is Mark Bradford. Mark Bradford personally was very influential to me. He's actually an influence as to why I actually quit corporate America, Brandon. I don't know if you know this, because of his prodding, and said, I understand you have a gallery. I was operating it kind of as moonlight operation. And he's like, you need to lean into it because artists need a place to show their work. And so I did. This work, I was blown away. I got a chance to see his work in 2013 in London at the White Cube Gallery. And this work is 102 by 143. So it's massive. It's mixed media on canvas. And it sold for $4.9 million on an estimate of $4 to $6 million. It's called He Barked Just Like a Watchdog. And it was made or executed in 2011. And the reason why I talk about the size on this one is because if you can imagine this Black man creating works, walking into a high school gymnasium, imagine the scale of a high school gymnasium, and the walls are filled with these paintings. That was my impression. You asked me why I quit corporate America. When I walked into this gallery and saw these works and realized that they were going for about $1 million each then. So let's also put that into perspective. So that's easily 5 times, right? In the 10 years that this work has been out there. And I saw this work at its inception. Rasheed Johnson, Standing Broken Men, was executed in 2020. It sold for 1.74 million on an estimate of 1 to 1.5 million. This work is important because if you've gone to the Metropolitan Opera, and this was unveiled during the opera that was based on the Charles Blow story in October of 2021. And so this is a massive installation in the lobby of the Metropolitan Opera. And this is like a sample of that. This is like like just a small portion of it. And so there's always an automatic reference of this work, if you own it, to this work at the Metropolitan Opera, which is tile work, which is just amazing. It is tile work in imagery. Mm. And then lastly, we have Amy Sherrill. And you know, everyone should be able to recognize that style. She was the portrait artist for Michelle Obama. This is Pilgrimage of the Chameleon. It went for close to the high range. It went for 2.1 million, and the range was 1.8 to 2.5. And this was executed in 2016. Hmm. Sotheby's, they had a few works, and they're all abstract. And I don't know if that was a part of their specialist decision making or not. But you have Ed Clark, executed in 1967. This went for $882,000 on a range of $200 to $300. So well above the range. It's called Blue Splash. Betty Saar is finally having her moment. She had an exhibition at the MoMA in New York in the last year or so, and people have finally started to recognize her for her just amazing practice. She's LA based. This work was executed in 1972. It's acrylic on cut leather, and it's 20 by 50. It went for more than the range, which was 200 to 300, and it sold for $378,000. Lastly, recurring theme, Sam Gilliam. This is not unusual that he would be shown or, again, unearthed. Usually when an artist passes away, you tend to see people go into their closets, into their collections, and pull those works out. So Sam Gilliam passed away in July. This work, the projection was 1.2 to 1.8 million. It sold for 1.9 million, or 1.865 to be specific. And it's 49 by 108 inches wide. So it's a fairly large work. And so the other thing I should highlight, and I wanted to say this too, in terms of these works at the Sotheby's auction, of the first 9 works in the auction, 3 of them were by Black artists. And these were the 3 in the first 9. And so that says something about prominence. It says something about the marketing. It says something about kind of the tone they wanted to set, because what happens is over the course of the night, the audience dwindles, right? And so it might be a 2-hour activity. Once the most exciting lots have been sold, people start to leave. And so that means there was an expectation that these would be important. And then the last that I'd like to show you, is Arnie Barnes again. So recurring theme. So Phillips got in on the action, Christie's got in on the action, and so did Sotheby's. And this work was estimated to go for 200 to 300,000, and it went for 600,000. It's a smaller one. It's 26 by 29 inches. So it's the smallest of the 3 that we've seen. Any questions about the auction? The 2 that I wanted to highlight, the first that I presented, again, about positioning and we talked about this earlier, Brandon, that these are theatrics, these auctions. And so for the Howard Pendell sale and the Ernie Barnes, they bookended. Howard Dina was number 1 in the auction, and they knew that it would be a strong close with Ernie Barnes. He was number 60.
Yeah. Somebody asked a question I know is near and dear to your heart, which is how much do the artists themselves make from these sales versus others?
You know, that is, to me, that breaks my heart. And I first probably got a whiff of this when the Kerry James Marshall work sold to Diddy. And I think it sold for low 20 million. And I learned for the first time that artists get nothing. They get, it's probably the only art form that there's no residual. That is changing by sheer force and by technology. There are a number of operations and platforms out there now leveraging really the platforms that were enabled by the Bitcoins of the world, and that is smart contracts and also the enforceability of those are also helping to manage provenance, which is perhaps it's almost like a title to the house, right? It's like who's owned it. It's on the ledger for eternity of what the transfer has been, and then also some conditions upon transfer, which would enable artists to get paid.
So basically, it's a sad state of affairs right now, but you see promise from basically blockchain enabled technology where artists will get cuts of future sales built into smart contracts. And
Absolutely.
then it's easier to track the provenance of the work, or basically what's real, who's owned it, the chain of ownership, that kind of stuff. So you're bullish on that part of
Absolutely.
all the
And
hype.
there's a company out here called Fairchain that's doing a bit of this work, and they're partnering with galleries. And so I think ultimately that will become a key factor for artists in terms of them making decisions on which gallery to go to, whether or not they will put them on that platform. And so today you have some contracts of sales that try to address some of this. Even in my contracts, the right of first refusal to buy back the work, that helps to protect the artist in some way. But it doesn't address this issue, and that is when it actually flips and sells.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's jump into Art Basel, and I'll speed along on this. These are just some highlights. I had to put in, we are Bison from, through and through. And so one of the highlights is Biza Butler. She is having like an incredible run. And she had this in the Dice booth. Dice Projects had a booth of empowering Black women. And so he also had another Bison there. I didn't have a copy of work to for Jewel Ham. She's someone definitely to watch as well. And I also picked out, because this is a sale that went to an institution. Oh, let me back up. The Biza sale is rumored to have gone to either Diddy or Private Collection. It seems that he was hot on this one. I'm not sure where the gallery ultimately decided, but it seemed to have been some controversy during the early days of Basel. The Vaughn Spann work to the right is called Marred Men, Factors of Loss, and it was created in 2022. It went to the Dela Cruz collection in Miami for $180,000. The Rayleigh Gallery, which is in Lagos and Los Angeles, had an artist by the name of Tanya Inje. This work, incredibly well priced, was $18,000 to $28,000, slight variations based on size. And she sold out her booth of about 6 paintings of these paintings. And in various scenes, this was one of my favorite, but it also reinforced the theme that I wanted to highlight, and you'll see it as it comes over a course of a few of the other slides. And so what we have on the right is Kalita Rouse. Kalita Rouse is one of our HBCU sisters. She went to Spelman College. She is rep by Lehman Maupin. This is called Our Grace, executed in 2022. And this was sold to a trustee of the Brooklyn Museum for $50,000. And the reason why I'm making the notes is because I want you to see the level of collector and their associations that are a really key part of their ability to have access to the work. And then also what it means in terms of the potential that this work might end up in the Brooklyn Museum.
Got it. So another question came in, and I want to tie this to a broader theme that I think is important for us to touch on in this conversation for people to really understand the opportunity, right? Not just the opportunity in terms of there's noise, you're seeing, placement in kind of central moments, but also the factors that go into driving value and how those factors could actually be influenced in some way, right? So the question is it value in the resale market? How does the value exist after payment or grow after payment? And I know we've had conversations before, and you're like, basically kind of think about the artist in the center of a number of different players, right? There's the gallery, there's the museum, there's the brokers. Can you just kind of lay out the landscape and the press? Can you lay out the landscape and what are the drivers that really push value up? And how do you see that intersecting with the African-American art market specifically?
Sure. First and foremost, it begins with the artist, right? At the end of the day, it's about the artist. It is about their skill. It's about the themes they cover. It's about the aesthetic, whether or not you just find it beautiful. And so with that, then you want to understand really, kind of what is their practice trajectory? Are they kind of a part of a community of artists and they, are feeding off and actually being challenged? Or are they working in isolation and really disconnected? Are they affiliated with a gallery? Are they not? Are they able to work across multiple mediums? Are they intellectually kind of like strong? Are they able to communicate their work? I mean, it's no different than you hiring someone for your company. I mean, you generally are going to hire someone that has broader, particularly for strategic important roles, someone that has a great background, someone that has evidence that they are committed to their craft, someone that actually has some vision and new ideas. And so what's really important in this is not a passive pursuit. It's not you go in and you see pretty pictures. If you're doing this with the expectation of wanting to drive value, then you're gonna have to do work to learn about the artist and their practice and what drives them and what motivates them. If they are, just painting the same old thing day in and day out, and they're not influenced by anything broader than themselves or kind of what a narrow kind of perspective is, then they're probably not going very far. But if, the artist has a way of looking at the world and really trying to contribute to new narratives, trying to bring forth histories that have been untold, then you're onto something. I had a collector that I valued and was a mentor of mine. And the first thing she would ask me before I could even present work to her was, tell me about the artist and tell me what they read.
Mm.
It seems like irrelevant, right? But it's really not.
Interesting. And
Yeah.
I think there's another part to this as well. The question was really around like resale value, which implies you have to sell to it's kind of this trade-off of if you have art you love, but then that art does really well, do you
Buy
take the
two.
money?
Buy two.
You buy two. Okay. But the other thing is, and I want you to break this down because I don't know if a lot of people fully understand this. There are other ways to get liquidity from your piece and still own it, right? You can get a loan against certain art. Or do you see that only, for the most prominent pieces and at this time, majority artists, not necessarily underrepresented? What are the other options?
It's generally if they have an auction record. The auction record is really, and that's why I spend so much time on it. The auction records are really important because they're the only indication of value that third parties can use, particularly lenders. And they're not going to dig that deep, right? They want what's in front of their face and what's obvious. And so let me just first say this, first, love the work, and buy at a rate that you can afford. And so if it never increased in value, you've already won because you are able to look at something every day that you absolutely love. That's how I started buying work.
Yeah.
Once you get a little more sophisticated, then you can start to dig into the history of the artist and what they're interested in. And then you'll start to make more investments. But starting out the gate, I wouldn't go out and say, I'm going to drop down. I wouldn't spend more than $5,000 if I were just starting out. I just wouldn't. I mean, no matter who you are, you need to learn and you need to spend time. Before I even spend money, I'd probably spend time in a lot of museums and go to art fairs just as an observer and talk to galleries.
And you broke a lot of this down in a newsletter that you guest contributed on as well. So again, I would encourage folks, you kind of went into the playbook of if you're just starting off, here's where you go, here's how much to spend, here's how to pace yourself. So I would definitely recommend that for folks in the audience. Yeah. I know we're getting close to time. I
only have about two more pages.
Okay, I want to make sure you communicate, kind of any overarching thoughts as well as we kind of, close out in addition to kind of covering those pieces.
I will. And so the one reason I wanted to just, there was a theme here too, and you can see folks in water, right? And they're having a good time. If you go to the next page, this is from, on the left, this is from Miriam Ibrahim's gallery. And this was a prominent work. It's a beautiful work by a Brazilian artist. And Miriam Ibrahim, by the way, is in Chicago. She's in Paris, and she's opening in Mexico City, a Black woman. And then on the right, there's another Black woman, gallery owner, and these are two works from her booth, and she sold out. And her name is Nicola Vassell. Nicola Vassell is in Chelsea. She just opened right after the pandemic. And she, as you can see here, this artist is also in water. And there's a theme here, and the theme is all around leisure. It seems that these Black artists think this is important, given the heaviness of the times and all of the work that has been created for social justice issues. It seems that there are many Black artists now wanting to help us see that it's okay to relax and to have recreation. And so, I just highlight this because artists typically are trying to lead the thinking of the people. And I just wanted to make sure that was clear. The next slide is just more work, but again, work that went to institutions. Jack Shaman's work the first work is Resounding Success. The first work is called Arm Peace by Nick Cave. And the gallerist Jack Shaman talked about just his booth having resounding success. This sold for $180,000. Most people are used to seeing Nick Cave's work in the sound suits. And if anyone is coming to New York, I haven't seen it yet, but it's been highly recommended that they should see the work or retrospective of his that's at the Guggenheim. It just opened about 3 weeks ago. And this is a departure from that work. And so what you see here is him flexing a little differently, even in a work that he just created, while he also has a retrospective happening at the Guggenheim. Ebony Patterson. This work was purchased by the Indianapolis Museum for $100,000 to $150,000. I don't have the exact amount, but again, Ebony Patterson has done, she's been repped by Monique Maloche in Chicago, Jamaican artist. She used to teach at in Kentucky in an MFA program, and she's just brilliant in terms of the level of depth in her work and the intricacies of her using mixed medium. And lastly, I wanted to end with Frank Bowling. He's someone that I learned about when I first went to London. He was knighted by the Queen maybe around 2015, 2016. He's still living. He's in his 90s. But as abstract expressionists go, there's no one greater. And that is, this went for high six figures. And this is Sir Frank Bowling. So with that, I'll leave it with, based on what you heard, based on what we talked about in terms of market conditions, what's happening in the auction houses and what's happening in the sales at the art fairs, is now a good time to invest in Black art. And if you haven't come to your conclusions, I'm going to lead you somewhere. And I'm going to say absolutely yes. It absolutely is. And so as market conditions are somewhat tenuous, and you see that there are a number of works that they weren't blowing the doors off in terms of beating estimates for some of the auctions, although there were some that stood out. And so if there was an analogy I'd like to draw for anyone here who's new to this marketplace, is that, everyone knows in the housing market that is what we call a seller's market and a buyer's market. And so what I would say that we're emerging and moving into, because the art market tends to lag the overall economy by about 6 months. And so what I would say is we're probably entering into a buyer's market, which means that terms could be more favorable. You can buy on loan. You can buy, by the way. You should ask if you can buy on installment. There are many galleries that will allow you to do that. There are new tools now called Art Finance out there that allow you to buy with zero finance, with $0 down. And so there are many ways to lean the terms in your favor as the market softens. But I will
Do
tell
the
you,
more prestigious galleries allow that, or is that more kind of a prestige thing where you have to kind of have money and they don't accept installments or zero down? Is that more for the non, call it, prestigious or the highest end of the market?
I mean, for most people here, I mean, you're looking at works that are going to sell for $500,000 to $1 million. If this market, if this group is buying at that level and looking to buy, then I would say that I would expect as a gallery that you should be able to buy that, and not finance it. And so, but I don't have the answer into, I don't know what another gallery might say, but I would say I wouldn't be shy about going into any space and asking for kind of what you're interested in, what you need, if you love the work.
Got it. Got it. Well, look, I will say this. There are multiple ways to kind of get exposure to Black art. You can go direct. There are funds. If anyone is really interested in kind of getting into this space, getting exposure, diversification to this asset class, reach out to me or reach out to Lewis, and we can definitely steer you in the right direction with resources. And also, if there is kind of interest, we can kick off a Slack channel in our Slack, Gravy Slack, just focused on kind of art for folks that are into it. So with that being said, Lewis, want to say thank you for blessing us with your infinite knowledge in this space, your dedication to this space. I know for a fact that Lewis is mission driven when it comes to this. So, as he said, buy what you love. Lewis is doing what he loves, and he's kind of dedicated his life to this space. And I think that's a noble cause for sure. So I want to say thank you. I appreciate you constantly giving to the Gravy community. I think this was an incredible presentation. For the folks that made it, thank you for joining us. As always, we try to bring you insights for you to help you make decisions around building generational wealth that are informed. And then lastly, what I'll say is, we're going to record this. So, share this with folks that you think may benefit, and follow Lewis. Lewis, where can people get in touch with you? Can you throw out some handles?
Oh yeah, my IG I think is the easiest, at Long Gallery, LongGallery. And I'm responsive to it. And if you have any further questions or like information or looking at it, your journey in terms of collecting, would love to kind of like connect with you. And everyone has a unique situation. I would say don't sit on the sidelines if you're interested. I mean, it's incredibly rewarding. It's a lifestyle. It's not just a purchase, but it's one that will take you into realms that you would never have imagined if you really commit to it.
Love it. Love it. Follow at Long Gallery. Thank you again, Lewis. Thank you for everyone that joined. We'll see you again at the next conversation. Have a great rest of your evening. We'll talk to you soon. Take care.